The afternoon sun hung low over the small town, the kind of day where everything moved a little slower and the air smelled faintly of dust and gasoline. Kids were walking home from school, laughing, kicking stones down the street, while cars rolled lazily by. Among them was a boy carrying a backpack that looked a bit too big for his small shoulders. He wasn't the loud type. He kept to himself most days, the kind of kid who smiled shyly when spoken to and always said thank you, even when it wasn't needed. He loved simple things, sketching in his notebook, building little things from scrap wood, and above all watching martial arts movies. To him, Chuck Norris wasn't just an action star. He was a hero. He admired how calm and brave he always seemed, how he could stand up to anyone without ever losing his cool. Sometimes the boy would try copying the moves he saw in the movies, though he'd always end up laughing at himself. That day started like any other. School had ended early because of a teacher's meeting, and the boy decided to stop by the small convenience store a few blocks from home. It wasn't a big place, just one of those old corner shops with a faded red sign and a squeaky glass door. He had a few dollars in his pocket, just enough to buy a soda and maybe a candy bar. He pushed the door open and the little bell above it jingled. The owner, an older man who knew most of the kids in town, gave a small wave from behind the counter. The boy waved back, smiling, then headed toward the fridge in the back. He always liked the orange soda. It reminded him of summer afternoons and his dad teaching him how to ride a bike. He reached into the fridge, grabbed a can, and then realized his backpack strap had come loose. He crouched down to fix it, setting his bag on the floor. When he stood up again, he noticed a couple of adults nearby glancing at him, maybe because of how fast he moved, or maybe because kids didn't usually hang around alone this late in the afternoon. He didn't think much of it. He walked to the counter, placed the soda down, and handed over his coins. The owner smiled, gave him a piece of candy for free, and told him to stay out of trouble. The boy thanked him, slung his bag over his shoulder, and walked outside. The air was warm and bright, and everything seemed perfectly ordinary. He started down the sidewalk, sipping his drink through a straw. Halfway down the street, he noticed a police car parked by the curb. The officer inside looked busy writing something on a notepad. The boy didn't pay much attention. He was lost in thought, daydreaming about one of his favorite Chuck Norris scenes, but then his backpack slipped again. It fell right near a trash can on the edge of the sidewalk, spilling a few of his notebooks. He quickly knelt to pick them up. That's when it happened. A voice behind him barked sharply, "Hey, you there!" Startled, the boy froze for a second, then turned around. The police officer had stepped out of the car, looking straight at him. The man's tone was firm but not angry, more like he thought something wasn't right. The boy blinked, confused. "Me?" he asked quietly. "Yeah, you," the officer said, walking closer. "What are you doing here?" "What's in the bag?" The boy's heart started to race. Just my school stuff," he said, his voice shaking a little. The officer's gaze fell to the bag near the trash can. "Looked like you dropped something behind there. Mind showing me what's inside?" The boy didn't understand why he was being questioned. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He just picked up his notebooks. But when a police officer asked something, he'd always been taught to listen. So he unzipped his bag with trembling hands and held it open. "See? Books, and my pencil case," he said softly. The officer took a quick glance, but his eyes narrowed like he wasn't sure whether to believe the boy or not. Maybe he'd seen something from the car that looked suspicious. Maybe he was just being careful. Still, the boy could feel people slowing down as they walked past. A few adults turned to look. Whispers started floating around, the kind of whispers that make someone's ears burn even if they can't hear the words clearly. The boy felt his throat tighten. His hands were shaking now. "I didn't do anything," he said, barely above a whisper. The officer's voice softened just a little. "I didn't say you did. Just checking. There's been some trouble in this area lately. Kids fooling around, taking things from the stores. You sure that's not you?" The boy's eyes went wide. "No, sir. I swear I didn't take anything. I bought a soda. You can ask the man in the store." The officer sighed, rubbed the back of his neck, and looked toward the shop. "Wait here," he said. The boy nodded quickly, too scared to move an inch. He stood there on the sidewalk, clutching his backpack, feeling every passing second stretch longer and heavier. People still glanced at him as they walked by, some curious, some suspicious, and that made it worse. After what felt like forever, the officer came back. He had talked to the store owner, who must have told him the truth, that the boy paid for his drink, that he hadn't done anything wrong. Still, instead of walking away, the officer stayed there, watching the boy closely. "You can go," he said finally, but his tone wasn't quite friendly. "Just be careful how you move around out here. Some people might get the wrong idea." The boy nodded again, picked up his things, and whispered, "Yes, sir." He turned and started to walk home, his face burning with embarrassment. He could feel the stares following him, even after the officer got back into the car. He didn't understand why it happened. He hadn't stolen anything. He hadn't even done anything strange. He just dropped his backpack, that's all. By the time he reached the next block, he stopped and sat down on the curb. His soda can was warm now, but he didn't care. He just stared at the ground, his throat aching. He'd never been talked to like that before. Never made to feel like he was doing something bad when he wasn't. He thought about how people always said, "Respect the police." He did. His parents always taught him that police were there to protect. But now he felt something different. Not anger, but confusion. Like the world had tilted a little and he couldn't find his balance. For a long time, he just sat there, watching cars go by, wondering why a small mistake could turn into something that made him feel so small. Across the street, the sound of laughter caught his attention. A group of people were standing outside a diner, pointing towards something. Then he noticed it, a small crowd forming near the corner. There were cameras, a couple of crew vans, and bright lights. He recognized that kind of setup from TV. Someone was filming. Curiosity tugged at him. He stood up slowly and walked closer, still holding his backpack tight. When he got near enough, he saw what everyone was looking at. A man standing with the crew, wearing jeans, a button-up shirt, and a smile that somehow felt calm even in the middle of the chaos. It was Chuck Norris. The boy froze for a moment, his heart skipping a beat. He couldn't believe it. The man whose movies he watched almost every weekend was standing right there. Real, not behind a screen. He'd heard there was filming going on nearby for some kind of show, but he never thought he'd actually see him. The officer who had stopped him earlier was now standing near his patrol car just down the street, talking into his radio. The boy thought about walking away, not wanting to draw attention again, but something told him to stay. He just stood there quietly at the edge of the crowd, trying to see what was happening. Suddenly he heard the officer's voice again, louder this time. "Hey, you! Come here." The boy's stomach dropped. He turned slowly, his eyes meeting the officer's again. The man motioned him over with a sharp gesture. The people nearby turned their heads, curious. For a moment, no one said a word. The air around them felt still, the kind of silence that makes every sound seem louder than it really is. The boy stood there frozen, gripping his backpack tightly against his chest. The officer looked uneasy now, as though he hadn't expected anyone, let alone Chuck Norris himself, to step in. Chuck took a slow step closer. His voice stayed calm but carried enough strength that everyone could hear it clearly. "You said he was causing trouble?" The officer shifted his weight and cleared his throat. "Well, not exactly. Earlier I saw him near the store, looked a bit suspicious, that's all. Just checking things out." Chuck's eyes softened as he turned toward the boy. "What's your name, son?" The boy hesitated before answering quietly. "I was just buying a soda. I dropped my bag. That's all." His voice trembled a little, but there was honesty in it. That kind of raw truth that you can feel without needing proof. Chuck crouched slightly, lowering himself to the boy's eye level. "You didn't take anything from the store?" he asked gently. The boy shook his head fast. "No, sir. I paid for it. You can ask the man at the counter." "I already did," the officer added, trying to sound defensive but less certain now. "The shopkeeper said he paid, but I didn't want to assume. We've had problems around here lately." Chuck nodded slowly, standing straight again. He looked at the officer, then back at the boy. "I understand," he said evenly. "But sometimes trying to protect people can turn into something else if we forget to listen first." The officer looked slightly embarrassed, glancing toward the growing crowd that had gathered. People were whispering now, holding up their phones, though Chuck seemed to ignore it completely. Chuck placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "You okay, son?" The boy nodded, though his eyes were shiny and his throat felt tight. He hadn't cried yet, but he was close. "I didn't do anything wrong," he summed. "Aid softly. almost like he was reminding himself. Chuck gave a small smile. "I believe you." That simple sentence changed everything. The tension in the boy's shoulders seemed to melt away a little. The officer shifted awkwardly and mumbled something about misunderstanding. Chuck didn't scold him. Instead, he spoke with the kind of calm that came from years of wisdom and patience. "Sometimes we look at someone and see what we're afraid of instead of who they really are," he said quietly, his tone still respectful. "But the world's got enough fear in it already. What we need more of is understanding." The officer nodded slowly. "You're right, Mr. Norris, I didn't mean any harm." "I know," Chuck said. "You were just doing your job. But maybe next time ask before assuming, especially with kids." The officer nodded again, his tone softer now. "Understood." Chuck turned back to the boy. "You live around here?" "Yes, sir. Just down that road." He pointed toward a row of small houses in the distance. "Good," Chuck said. "You've got good manners. That says a lot about you." The boy lowered his eyes, a shy smile breaking through for the first time since the whole thing began. Chuck looked at the officer again. "Do you mind if I walk him home? Seems like he could use some company." The officer hesitated for a second, but then smiled faintly and nodded. "Of course not. Go ahead." The crowd that had gathered began to disperse, whispering among themselves about what they'd just witnessed. Chuck gave a polite wave to a few people, then turned his full attention back to the boy. They started walking side by side down the quiet street. The afternoon sun was beginning to fade, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. Chuck walked at an easy pace, not saying much at first. He let the silence sit comfortably between them, giving the boy time to calm down. After a few minutes, he said gently, "That must have been a little scary for you, huh?" The boy nodded. "I thought he was going to take me away. I didn't even know what I did wrong." Chuck looked ahead, his expression thoughtful. "Sometimes people make mistakes when they're trying to do the right thing. It doesn't make it fair, but it happens. What matters is that you stay honest and calm just like you did." "I tried," the boy said quietly, "but I felt like nobody would believe me." Chuck smiled a little. "That's the hardest part, isn't it? When you're telling the truth, but the world doesn't seem to see it. But I'll tell you something. Truth always finds its way out. It might take a little time, but it never stays hidden." They walked another block before the boy asked almost shyly, "Were you really filming something here?" Chuck chuckled. "Yeah, just a small project about community safety. Nothing big. But I like coming to towns like this, real people, real stories." The boy nodded. "I watch your movies sometimes." "Oh yeah?" Chuck said, grinning. "Which one's your favorite?" The boy thought for a second, then said, "The one where you help the kid who gets bullied." Chuck laughed softly. "That's a good one. You know, when I made that movie, I wanted people to understand something. That real strength isn't about fighting. It's about staying calm when things get tough. Just like you did back there." The boy looked up at him, but I was scared. "Being scared doesn't make you weak," Chuck said gently. "It means you care about doing the right thing." They walked in silence for a few moments, the wind rustling the trees overhead. The boy started to feel lighter. The fear and embarrassment from earlier slowly faded away, replaced by a quiet sense of comfort. When they reached the corner of his street, Chuck stopped and looked around. The houses were small but well kept, lined with gardens and fences. It was the kind of neighborhood that looked peaceful, even if life inside wasn't always easy. "This your place?" Chuck asked. The boy nodded. "That one with the blue door?" Chuck nodded approvingly. "Nice home." "Your parents around?" "Mom's at work. Dad's out of town for a few days." "Then I'll make sure you get inside safe," Chuck said kindly. As they reached the front steps, the boy turned to him. "Thank you for helping me," he said quietly. Chuck smiled and put a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to thank me. I just did what anyone should do, listen before judging." The boy looked down, fiddling with the strap of his bag. "I didn't think anyone would believe me." Chuck tilted his head. "When you're honest, you don't need everyone to believe you. Just make sure you believe in yourself first. That's how people like me started. Small, scared sometimes, but honest." The boy smiled, finally feeling the weight of the day lift off his chest. "I'll remember that." Chuck nodded, stepping back toward the sidewalk. "Good. And one more thing," he added, pointing toward the boy's backpack. "Don't carry the world on your shoulders. It's heavy. Just carry what's yours and let the rest go." The boy didn't fully understand what that meant yet, but he nodded anyway. As Chuck began walking back toward the street, the boy called out, "Mr. Norris." Chuck turned, smiling. "Can I shake your hand?" the boy asked. Chuck laughed softly and walked back, offering his hand. The boy shook it firmly, his small hand swallowed in Chuck's strong grip. The next morning came quiet and calm. The boy woke up early, still thinking about what had happened the day before. The sunlight touched the walls of his room, and for a moment he wondered if it had all been a dream. But then he looked at his notebook on the table, the one with the small drawing of him and Chuck walking down the street, and he smiled. It had been real. He got ready for school, brushed his hair, and slung his backpack over his shoulder. As he walked down the road, everything looked the same, yet something felt different. The neighbors waved at him like they always did, but this time their smiles seemed a little warmer. Maybe they had seen what happened yesterday. Maybe they knew. When he reached the store, he hesitated for a second. That was where it all began, where the misunderstanding had started. He stood outside looking at the glass door. He almost turned away, not wanting to face the memory, but then he took a deep breath and went inside. The store owner looked up from behind the counter. He was an older man with kind eyes and a white mustache. "Morning, kid," he said. "You doing all right today?" The boy nodded. "Yes, sir," the man smiled. "Heard what happened yesterday. That officer came by later and explained everything. Said you were a good kid. I told him I already knew that." The boy smiled a little. "Thank you." The man leaned on the counter. "You know, not everyone would have stayed calm like you did. You handled yourself better than most grown-ups would have." The boy looked down, shy. "I was scared." "Of course you were," the man said kindly. "But courage doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you keep doing what's right even when you are." The boy thought about those words as he paid for his drink. When he stepped outside, he noticed a few people whispering nearby. One woman said, "That's the boy from yesterday, isn't it?" Another replied, "Yeah, the one Chuck Norris helped." He felt his face warm. It was strange being noticed like that. He wasn't used to it. But he didn't feel embarrassed, just different. As he continued walking to school, he heard a car slow down beside him. For a second, his heart skipped, thinking it was the same officer again. But it wasn't. It was another man in a dark uniform, the police chief. He rolled down the window and gave a friendly smile. "Hey, buddy," the chief said. "You're the kid from yesterday, right?" The boy nodded carefully. "Wanted to say something," the chief continued. "That officer from yesterday feels real bad about how things went. He's a good man, just made a mistake. Sometimes we forget how our actions can scare people. He's learning from it, and I wanted you to know that." The boy nodded again. "It's okay." "I'm not mad," the chief smiled. "That's good to hear. You're a kind kid. We could use more people like you." Then he handed the boy a small card with the town's police logo on it. "If you ever need help, you call this number, all right?" "Yes, sir," the boy said, tucking the card into his pocket. As the car drove away, the boy kept walking, feeling a strange mix of pride and confusion. Yesterday, he'd been scared and powerless. Today, people were treating him like someone special. But he didn't feel special. He just felt normal. At school, things were buzzing. Some classmates had seen the video online. Someone from the crowd had recorded the moment Chuck stepped in, and now it was spreading fast. When he walked into class, a few kids turned to look. One whispered, "That's him." During lunch, a small group gathered around him. "Is it true?" one boy asked. "Did Chuck Norris really talk to you?" He nodded, a little embarrassed. "Yeah, he helped me. What's he like?" a girl asked eagerly. "He's nice," the boy said simply. "Not like in the movies, quieter but strong. You can just tell." "Did he teach you karate moves?" another kid joked. The boy laughed softly. "No, he just talked to me." That answer made the group pause. They were expecting something big or dramatic, but instead it was just simple, real. The kind of real that most people overlook. After lunch, when things settled down, the boy sat near the window watching the clouds drift by. He thought about what Chuck had said, "Truth always finds its way out." That line stayed in his head all day. After school, when he got home, his mom was already there. She looked at him holding her phone. "Someone from the news called," she said carefully. "They want to talk about what happened." He blinked. "The news?" She nodded. "They said it's a good story about kindness, misunderstanding, and how one man stepped in at the right time. But I told them we'd think about it first." He didn't know what to say. The idea of cameras and reporters made him nervous. "Do I have to?" he asked. "No," she said gently. "Only if you want to, but maybe it could help people learn something." That night after dinner, he sat on his porch again, looking at the sky. The stars were just starting to appear. Everything felt so calm compared to yesterday. He thought about the officer, the crowd, and then Chuck, how one person stepping in had changed everything. He wondered if he'd ever see him again. Then he remembered the words Chuck had said when they reached his house. "Don't carry the world on your shoulders. Just carry what's yours." He still didn't fully understand it, but he felt like he was starting to. Maybe it meant not letting other people's mistakes weigh you down. Maybe it meant forgiving even when it was hard. The next day, while he was helping his mom water the garden, a dark SUV stopped outside their house. His heart jumped. The door opened, and there he was, Chuck Norris, wearing a simple shirt and jeans, smiling as if he were visiting an old friend. The boy froze, surprised but excited. "You came back." Chuck laughed softly. "Told you I'd check on you." "I was filming nearby again." His mom came out startled. "Oh my goodness." "You're—" Chuck held up a hand, smiling kindly. "Just Chuck, ma'am." "I wanted to see how your boy was doing," she smiled warmly. "He's doing much better, thanks to you." Chuck turned to the boy. "Mind if we talk for a minute?" They sat on the porch steps while his mom went inside to bring some lemonade. The air was warm and the street was quiet. Chuck looked at him and said, "I heard the story went online." The boy nodded. "Yeah, some people at school saw it." Chuck smiled. "I figured that might happen. You okay with that?" "I think so," the boy said. "I didn't want people to think bad about the officer." Chuck nodded approvingly. "That's a good heart you've got. Forgiveness isn't easy, but it makes you stronger than anger ever could." The boy looked at him curiously. "Did people ever treat you unfairly?" Chuck chuckled softly. "More times than I can count. When I was young, I was shy, quiet, and didn't think I'd ever be strong. But I learned that being strong isn't about fighting. It's about staying calm even when others lose their cool. That's what I saw in you that day." The boy smiled shyly. "You think I was brave?" Chuck nodded. "Braver than most people twice your age. You stayed calm. You told the truth. That takes real courage." They sat quietly for a moment, sipping lemonade. Then Chuck reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He handed it to the boy. "What's this?" the boy asked, opening it carefully. Inside was a card that said, "Free membership, Norris Martial Arts Center." The boy's eyes widened. "You mean—" The following Saturday came quicker than the boy expected. He had been thinking about Chuck's invitation all week, but now that the time had come, he felt a wave of nervousness wash over him. He had never done anything like this before. Sure, he'd watched martial arts on TV and in movies, but doing it for real was a completely different thing. He had no idea what to expect. Would he be the only kid there? Would everyone be better than him? He could already feel a pit forming in his stomach, but he remembered Chuck's words. "You've got the heart. Now let's build the strength to match it." The boy's mom drove him to the martial arts center that morning, and as they neared the building, he noticed it was a lot bigger than he had imagined. It looked like a regular gym on the outside with big windows and a sign that read, "Norris Martial Arts Center." He felt a bit overwhelmed as they parked in the lot. "Are you sure you want to do this?" his mom asked, noticing the worry on his face. He nodded, though it didn't completely take away the nerves. "Yeah, I think so." What if I'm not good enough?" His mom smiled softly. "Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about learning and having the courage to try." He nodded, then got out of the car. The air outside was cool and fresh, but the nerves still clung to him. He walked toward the entrance, his heart beating faster with each step. As soon as they walked in, the atmosphere felt different. There was a calm energy in the air, like the kind you feel when everyone in the room is focused and determined. A few people were already warming up on the mats, stretching, running through drills, or practicing their stances. The boy looked around, feeling a little out of place. He had never done anything like this before, and he wasn't sure where to begin. Before he could get too lost in his own thoughts, a familiar voice called out from the other side of the room. "Hey there." The boy turned, and there was Chuck, standing with a big smile, dressed in a simple martial arts uniform. He looked just like the man the boy had seen on TV, but there was something about him in person that made everything seem even more real. "Ready for your first day?" Chuck asked, walking over with that steady, confident presence. The boy nodded, though his voice was a little shaky. I think so. I'm just nervous. Chuck gave him a warm, reassuring smile. That's normal. I was nervous my first day too. But it's okay. We start slow. You'll get the hang of it. The boy felt a little better hearing that. He followed Chuck to the area where the other kids were practicing, and Chuck introduced him to the instructor, a tall man with a kind face who greeted the boy with a firm handshake. Welcome. We're happy to have you here. Don't worry, we'll take it easy today, just getting you used to everything. The boy was relieved to hear that. He watched as the other kids lined up, each one wearing their martial arts gi, the traditional outfit. They looked serious, but there was no judgment in their eyes, only focus. He could see how much they loved it already. Chuck stood beside him, his presence calm and steady. You ready? The boy nodded again, even though he wasn't sure he was ready at all. The class began with a warm-up, simple stretches and movements to get the body loosened up. Chuck led him through the first few moves, showing him how to stretch his arms and legs properly. The boy followed along, feeling a little more at ease as his body began to relax. As they continued through the warm-up, Chuck explained the importance of discipline. In martial arts, we don't just learn how to fight, Chuck said. We learn how to control ourselves. The mind is just as important as the body. Without a focused mind, you can't move as effectively. The boy listened closely, soaking in Chuck's words. He'd always known that discipline was important, but hearing it from someone like Chuck made it seem more real. After the warm-up, it was time for the first lesson, stances. The instructor demonstrated how to stand, positioning the feet and legs in a way that made you feel strong and balanced. The boy tried to follow, but he wasn't used to standing that way. His legs felt wobbly, and he kept shifting his weight from side to side. Chuck noticed his struggles and came over to help. Don't rush, Chuck said, guiding the boy's feet into the right position. Take your time. It's not about being perfect right away. It's about finding your balance. The boy took a deep breath and concentrated. He shifted his weight carefully, trying to hold the stance without wobbling. It felt strange at first, but after a few tries, he began to feel a little more stable. Good, Chuck said, nodding. Now remember what I told you. It's about balance, in your body and in your mind. If your mind is calm, your body will follow. They continued practicing the stances for a while, each time getting a little better. The boy felt his body starting to listen to his mind, and for the first time that morning, he felt a little bit of pride. After a break, it was time to learn a basic move, the front kick. The instructor showed everyone how to lift their knee, then extend their leg forward in a quick, controlled motion. The boy watched closely, then tried to do it himself. At first, he kicked awkwardly and his foot didn't quite reach the right height. But Chuck was there again, gently adjusting his posture. Think of it like this, Chuck said, guiding his leg through the motion. It's not just about kicking. It's about control. You're not attacking, you're focusing on the technique. The boy woke up the next morning feeling a strange mix of excitement and nerves. Today was different. Today was the day he would practice what he had learned at the martial arts center. He had been thinking about Chuck's words all week. It's not about being perfect. It's about improving yourself every day. Those words had taken root in his mind and he wanted to put them into action. After breakfast, he packed his bag carefully. His notebook and pencil were there along with a water bottle. He didn't know exactly what he would need, but he wanted to be ready. As he walked out the door, his mom called out, "Be safe and remember, confidence comes from doing, not just thinking about it." The boy nodded, feeling a little braver. He knew she was right. He had spent enough time thinking about being scared. Now it was time to act. As he approached the martial arts center, he noticed the familiar black SUV parked nearby. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be Chuck? Sure enough, Chuck Norris stepped out of the car with his usual calm presence, smiling as he waved to him. Ready for another lesson? He asked. Yes, sir, the boy said, trying to keep his voice steady. Good. Let's get started, Chuck replied. Inside the center, the atmosphere was alive with energy. The mats were filled with students of all ages, practicing different techniques. The boy felt a little nervous as he walked in, but Chuck gave him an encouraging nod. Focus today, Chuck said. Not on beating anyone, not on being the best. Focus on yourself. The boy repeated the word silently in his mind. Focus on myself. He liked how that sounded. It made him feel like he had some control over things for once. The class began with stretching and warm-up exercises. The boy tried to follow along, moving his arms and legs as best as he could. He stumbled a few times, but Chuck came over to guide him gently. "Take your time," Chuck said. "It's not a race. Listen to your body and move with purpose." The boy felt reassured. He straightened his back and moved more carefully. Each movement became easier, and he noticed that with each step he felt a little more confident. After warming up, it was time for stances and balance exercises. Chuck demonstrated again, showing how important it was to have a stable foundation. "Balance isn't just about standing still," Chuck explained. "It's about being ready for whatever comes. Life throws challenges at you every day. If you're off balance, even a small challenge can knock you down. But if you're steady, you can handle almost anything." The boy listened carefully, feeling like Chuck's words applied to more than just martial arts. They were about life too. Next came the basics of defense. The instructor showed the students how to block and move safely. The boy watched closely, trying to mimic the motions. He stumbled a few times, but Chuck was right beside him, adjusting his posture and encouraging him. "You're doing fine," Chuck said. "Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about learning from each attempt. Every mistake is a step forward." The boy's confidence grew with each word. He began to move more fluidly, his kicks and blocks becoming smoother. He realized that the more he focused, the better he became. After a while, Chuck gathered the group for a lesson in discipline and respect. "Martial arts isn't just about strength," he said. "It's about respect. For yourself, for others, and for the world around you. Strength without respect is dangerous. Respect without strength leaves you vulnerable. You need both." The boy thought about what had happened with the officer and how Chuck had intervened. He realized that respect and understanding could make a huge difference in how people reacted to one another. He wanted to be that kind of person, calm, fair, and strong in the right way. The class continued with more advanced exercises, but Chuck stayed close, guiding the boy patiently. He learned how to combine movements, how to anticipate the next step, and how to stay calm even when things got difficult. During a break, Chuck sat with him and asked, "How are you feeling?" "Tired," the boy admitted, "but good. I think I'm getting better." "You are," Chuck said. "And remember, progress isn't always obvious. Some days it feels like nothing is happening. But if you keep showing up, if you keep trying, the changes are happening inside you. One day you'll look back and realize how far you've come." The boy nodded, feeling inspired. He wanted to keep learning, keep improving. He wanted to become stronger, not just physically, but mentally too. The afternoon passed quickly. The boy practiced his stances, kicks, and blocks repeatedly. Every time he made a mistake, Chuck encouraged him to try again. Every time he succeeded, Chuck praised him, but also reminded him to stay humble and focused. By the end of the session, the boy was exhausted, but his heart was full. He had learned so much, not just about martial arts, but about patience, focus, and believing in himself. As they left the center, Chuck turned to him and said, "I'm proud of you, not because you did everything perfectly, but because you didn't give up. That's what makes someone strong." The boy smiled. "Thank you, sir. I'll keep practicing," Chuck nodded. "Good. Remember, it's not just about what happens here. Take what you've learned today and apply it to everything in your life. That's the real strength." On the way home, the boy felt different. He felt like he had grown in some small, important way. He thought about the officer, the misunderstanding, and how Chuck had stepped in to help. He realized that strength wasn't just about fighting or defending yourself. It was about understanding, patience, and courage. When he got home, his mom noticed the change immediately. "You look different," she said. "I feel different," he admitted. "I learned a lot today. Not just about martial arts, but about life," she smiled. "I'm glad. It's amazing how much you can learn when someone guides you the right way." That night, the boy went to bed feeling proud and hopeful. He knew that there would be challenges ahead, but he also knew that he had the tools to face them. He had learned the value of patience, respect, and perseverance. He placed his martial arts card beside his notebook and closed his eyes, thinking about everything that had happened, the misunderstanding, the kindness of Chuck Norris, and the lessons he had learned. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was truly ready for whatever life had to offer. The next morning, he woke up early again, eager to practice the moves he had learned and to continue improving. He felt confident that with focus, discipline, and the right guidance, he could become stronger, braver, and more prepared for the world around him. And as he looked out the window at the quiet street, he knew that no matter what happened, he had already taken the first steps toward becoming someone he could be proud of, someone who faced challenges with courage, kindness, and determination. The boy nodded, trying again. This time he focused more on the movement and the way his body felt. His kick still wasn't perfect, but it felt a little smoother. After some practice, the boy was feeling more comfortable. He realized that the more he focused, the better he was able to execute the movements. It wasn't about speed or power yet. It was about understanding how his body moved in relation to his mind. By the end of the class, the boy was tired but proud. He had learned a few basic stances and a simple kick, but more importantly, he had learned something deeper about himself. Chuck clapped his hands and gathered the group together at the end of the lesson. Great work today, everyone. Remember, the most important thing in martial arts is not winning or being the best. It's about improving yourself every day. Keep showing up, keep practicing, and you'll keep getting better. The boy smiled. It wasn't about being perfect, he realized. It was about growth. Chuck came over to him as the class started to break up. You did well today, he said. You're going to do great here. The boy beamed with pride. Thanks. I'm glad I came. As he walked out of the martial arts center with his mom, he felt a new kind of confidence. It wasn't about being the strongest or the fastest. It was about being better than he was yesterday. And for the first time, he felt like he was really on the path to becoming the kind of person he wanted to be. As they drove home, the boy looked out the window, thinking about the lesson. He realized that martial arts wasn't just about learning how to defend yourself. It was about learning how to live. And that lesson he knew would stay with him long after today. Chuck smiled. Yeah, you come down any weekend you like. I'll make sure you learn more than just punches and kicks. You'll learn focus, patience, and confidence. You've already got the heart. Now let's build the strength to match it. The boy was speechless for a moment, staring at the card. Thank you, he whispered. Chuck stood and placed a hand on his shoulder. You earned it. Remember this day, because it's the start of something new. As Chuck got ready to leave, the boy's mom came back out to thank him again. He smiled and said, You raised a good one, ma'am. Then he walked to his car, waved once, and drove off. The boy stood there watching until the SUV disappeared down the road. Then he looked at the card again, his heart racing with excitement. That night, when he went to bed, he placed the card beside his drawing from before. He lay back, thinking about everything that had happened, how one bad moment had turned into something good, how a misunderstanding became a lesson, and how sometimes the right person shows up exactly when you need them. He didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The following weekend would bring new lessons, new friendships, and more moments that would change how he saw the world. But for now, as he drifted off to sleep, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. You've got a good handshake, Chuck said. Strong, honest. That's how you meet the world. With that, he gave a little wave and walked off down the street, the sun setting behind him. The boy stood on his porch for a while, watching until he disappeared around the corner. It almost felt unreal, like a scene out of one of his movies. But it wasn't a movie. It happened right there, on his street, in his small town, on an ordinary day that had suddenly turned extraordinary. When his mom came home later that evening, she noticed how quiet he was. You okay, sweetheart? She asked. He smiled a little. Yeah, just thinking. About school? She asked, setting down her bag. He shook his head. About how sometimes, even when things go bad, something good can still happen. She smiled, though she didn't fully understand. He didn't tell her everything, not yet. Some things, he thought, were meant to be kept in the heart a little longer before being shared. That night, before bed, he took out his notebook and drew a small picture. A man standing beside a small boy on a quiet street with sunlight in the background. He didn't write names. He didn't need to. As he stared at the drawing, a thought crossed his mind. Maybe heroes weren't just people in movies or comic books. Maybe they were the ones who showed up when no one else did. He placed the notebook on his nightstand and turned off the light, still smiling. Outside, the world was quiet again, the kind of quiet that didn't fee,